Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Rachel Winstead, naturopathic physician and host of the ReBootology Health Podcast, an interview series with leading experts of highly effective natural solutions for the health and happiness challenges faced by the modern woman. Here at the ReBootology Podcast, we don't believe there are bad therapies, just therapies that aren't right for everyone, and we keep looking for better care options. We believe there's a place for both symptom relief and treating the root cause of illness in medicine, and that's why we are excited to be doing this series where we discuss different conditions and wellness approaches with experts in their field. Thank you for joining us for today's interview. Today, we have Dr. Lexi Lain with us. Dr. Lexi, please say hello to our audience, and I will give them some information about your impressive background.
Hey, I am so thrilled to be a part of this podcast. So thank you so much for tuning in and hearing this awesome message.
Thanks, Dr. Lexi. Dr. Lexi Lain is a naturopathic doctor, speaker, and specialist in burnout prevention. And she's here with us today. We're so thrilled. She owns her private practice, Summit Vitality. She is a 3-time half Ironman finisher and is currently building the E10 Academy. Welcome, Dr. Lexi. I'm so excited to do this interview with you.
Yes, this is a really fun process to just get our message out. So thank you so much, Dr. Rachel.
My pleasure. I also want to remind everyone that we will not be answering questions during our live interview, but feel free to add comments and we will address them afterwards. Okay, Dr. Lexi, first question. We know that stress can be detrimental to our health, but can't stress be a good thing too? I mean, our stress hormones must be important for our survival, otherwise we wouldn't have them in our bodies, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And, so just like when we're working out, I like to use this analogy because, you're lifting weights and when you're first getting started, it's kind of hard, but over time and consistency, you get stronger, you see your muscle tone and you can do things a little bit harder and faster and heavier weight and more reps. So the stress at that instance is, it's an acute stress on the muscle, but you're getting stronger. Now, those stress hormones you're referencing, they're telling us to wake up in the morning and to get going and to do what we need to do. And all of those busy, very, very professional women out there with big goals, we need that energy and that drive. So those stress hormones really help us to do that. So in terms of our nerves, I try to say it's 3 levels. So the first level is that passionate level where we're super driven, but then we might overcommit. So then as we become that yes person, that's phase 2, where we're starting to feel that overwhelm seep in and the anxiety, and now we're not sleeping and now we're feeling the pressure. And then we get into that third phase, which is that burnout phase. So yes, it's a good thing, but as we always say, too much of a good thing is not so great.
I usually have too much of that good thing being cake, but I could see stress being that too.
No doubt. Yes.
Okay. So what is burnout exactly? And how do people know that's what they're dealing with?
Yes. So I describe burnout as like seasonal affective disorder. I used to live in Seattle and I remember whenever I would see the blue sky, that was when I realized, oh my gosh, how I'm impacted by that gray weather because it kind of sneaks up on you. Burnout is the same thing. It's like it just sneaks up on you and you don't even know you have it until there's a blue sky. So when I started to study and read up on the definition, even as a clinician, I started to realize, whoa, I think I might be having these symptoms. So it's really important to kind of know what that looks like. And so if you're starting to get to the place where, in our bodies, it's this fatigue, but it's a deep fatigue that a good night rest is not really going to cut it. So it's just this exhaustion. Those molehills, they feel like mountains. So you might feel like any little stressor is just, you can't handle it. It's too much. Emotionally, people can feel very apathetic, where they're kind of shutting down. They feel nothing. You might hear someone say, I just have nothing left to give. which is a really sad place to be. And, and especially as providers, it's a tricky spot because we have to give so much of ourselves. Anyway, so yeah, so that's emotional. And then you've got this, how your behavior changes. So at work, it might be that micro quitting where you're slowing down productivity. You just don't want to do the tasks. So you kind of push things off to the side. Maybe you get sloppier. You kind of don't care. That's another component. It's like, I don't care. So, the movie The Office, I think it
Hmm.
was called The Office. Um, Maybe it wasn't, but anyway, it was this movie where the guy, he's like just really showing up to work late and no one really cares. And the boss just keeps climbing the ladder. But he was actually representing kind of this micro quitting where it's like, you know, who cares? So those are some signs that you can see with burnout, and maybe some symptoms too.
As a Seattleite, born and raised, I have to say that image I completely relate to. Well,
Yes.
it's true. Well, I think you might be describing most working women in America, right?
Yes.
It it seems like the to-do list gets longer and longer every day, doesn't it? I guess
Yes. Yes.
the modern woman just keeps going, kind of like the Energizer Bunny, and pushes through the burnout. Why shouldn't we just keep going like the Energizer Bunny in these situations?
Well, you could keep going, but what's going to happen is that body is going to say, the body you're living in, it's going to say no thanks at some point. And, being the athlete that I am, I like to use the analogy of let's pretend like I asked you to hold a weight or just hold out your arm in front of you and just keep it there, just hold it there. And if I were to ask you to keep your arm held out for 3 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 24 hours, eventually that arm is going to give out. And it doesn't even matter whether you were holding weight or not. So that's a good example of how we get to burnout because we're not putting that weight down to allow our bodies to rest. So what happens is if you continue to push through trying to keep and hold the weight, because the weight in this representation is stress, the body it has a threshold, whether you like it or not. And so what we want to do is to prevent, because we being naturopathic
Mhm.
doctors, we love prevention, is to really encourage and say, hey, if your body is communicating to you that enough is enough, it's time to listen to that. And so sure, you can push through, and many do, and most of us do. I think that's that go, get them society. But it is good and highly encouraged to rest and recover in this busy lifestyle. So integrating that in and understanding its importance is that it's your way of putting that weight down so that your body and your mind and your emotions can be ready Monday morning, hitting the ground running. So that's why we try to say, hey, you know what? We're not ever going to fully eliminate stress, but it's about having a different kind of relationship with stress.
Yikes. It seems like burnout could be a cultural problem in America. You mentioned that you started digging into the research, the data behind burnout. When you started digging into that data, was there any particular group that was at higher risk for burnout? One that surprised you?
You know, I've thought about this quite a bit because what I think is most surprising is that it actually is spanning pretty much all industries.
Hmm.
Now, when I was researching, I realized that the term burnout started out with social workers and counselors. So it was in the psychology department, which naturally was where I started to look when I was starting to delve into this because I thought about counselors and how when the pandemic hit, I just thought to myself, they have got to be burning out. So naturally, I went in that direction. And so when I read that, I'm like, well, that makes a lot of sense. But a forgotten category of people that's really surprising is your sandwich generation. So these are the women. Yes. And it's usually women because we are the caretakers of families.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so for those who don't know the sandwich generation, it is the person who is having to take care of their parents as well as their children. And so they are sandwiched between these two generations. And so you're a caretaker of many different individuals, and that becomes very complicated. And they burn out because you're having to serve and be there for multiple people, as well as maintaining your own health and your careers and all the other stuff, right? So the sandwich generation is one, that really needs to be hearing this message for sure.
That
And
to-do
we
list, it gets long with that sandwich generation. Amen. I see that. I feel that. I'm part of that.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have a little hidden secret on how you take care of yourself, Dr. Rachel,
Well,
being in the sandwich generation?
I do. I do. It's Dr. Lexi's Get Your Spark Back.
Oh, nice plug.
Ooh. Yes, dear listeners, I have to say I was lucky enough to meet Dr. Lexi for the first time last year, and she is just so generous with her time and her education and her forethought leading on this topic. It just really spoke dearly to my heart in this as a member of the sandwich generation. And I was let to have a run at her Get Your Spark Back program, which is amazing. Dr. Lexi, I don't feel like I could do justice to our listeners explaining your program. I've experienced it, but as the creator, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. So, and thank you. It was a joy to have you go through the process. And, I thought about, we recommend natural therapies and we recommend lifestyle modifications. But I would sit in on boards through the American Medical Association and Mayo Clinic, and they would their direction was shifting away from self-care,
Mm-hmm.
and that it wasn't just about it, go and take care of yourself. It was about organizational psychology. They were having conversations about the way we were managing our time. And so I took the concepts of being a naturopathic doctor plus this idea of organizational psychology and the way that we run and operate our practices and then just our daily lives. And I started to kind of put together a course on that whole concept. And the first part of this is that when you're burnt out, you need building back up. And so when we're starting out in that Get Your Spark Back, it's about building you back up and finding those affirmations and finding what you do that's great, because we are hypercritical of ourselves. And when we can celebrate those wins and celebrate who an individual is and all those amazing things that you bring to the table, then we leverage that into, okay, now let's talk about what's blocking you. And so it's designed to work through those obstacles and challenges, but be in a solution mindset so that by the end you can turn some energy drained into some energy gains. And then we can begin to have that conversation on food as medicine and movement and all of that. So I take people through that process.
I love that. It's like when you are burnt out and exhausted, it's so easy to have that uh, imposter syndrome. And I think women, highly driven, entrepreneurial women, all women, the modern woman, we do so much and we are so good at what we do. We are hypercritical of ourselves, and that hypercritical meet burnout situation is just, it's self-reinforcing. And I love that your program starts with that, recognizing and celebrating the joy, what you do well, before moving on to that super detailed and lovely unblocking step.
Yes, yes.
So if our listeners, the modern woman who is seeking natural solutions to, well, reboot their health, takes away one thing from this interview, what would that be? What should that be?
Yes, and I'll give your listeners two top tips here.
Thanks, Dr.
And number
Lexi.
one, yes. Number one is as I had described before, is putting that weight down. It's really important to find rest and recovery. And the way that I describe rest and recovery is in your waking hours. So sleep is different. So we're talking about how do you have do nothing days, or days where, if you are the sandwich generation, finding ways to maybe have a caretaker take the role of, looking after parents or people you're taking care of, so that you can have a day to where you're not taking care of anyone, that you're just actually having some fun and inviting that into your day. And if you're of any sort of faith background, in Genesis, I think it's like the first chapter of Genesis, on the seventh day, God rested. So it's like, man, if that's even, it's biblical to be resting. So man, if God rests, so can you. So anyway, so finding time for rest and recovery. And then that second tip is, please don't do it alone. I know we are in that generation of self-treating, finding the TikTok doctor, finding the Dr. Google and Dr. hairstylist and all the people that you're getting your medical advice from. But if you're finding yourself overwhelmed and you're lost and you don't know where to start, or you've tried something's not working, that is what Dr. Rachel and myself are here for. And you don't have to go through this journey alone. And please
Amen.
don't.
Amen, Lexi. So, Lexi, is there anything else you'd like to tell our listeners, the modern woman, the entrepreneur, the woman who's wondering if she's burnt out? Is there some next steps that they could take?
Yes. So, well, I've got my Get Your Spark Back course. And so you can actually easily access that through my practice. So it's very easy to spell summit, like you're climbing a mountain, vitality, feeling the most alive you feel. And there you can set up discovery call to talk with me and we can talk about that course. I do love to speak. So if you've got a speaking platform, I'm happy to share this message. And then, the tip for you is, or just kind of the passing word, is that burnout, it's not a weakness. It really is a wake-up call. And it's a wake-up call just to say, wake up, it's time to really reevaluate how you're doing things. And it's okay that you're in this place, but you don't have to be stuck in this place. Your body can heal, and it's incredible when it does. So just know that wherever you are, it's a temporary place, and that you have resources such as Dr. Rachel and myself to help you get out of that place.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Lexi. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on ReBootology Health, Natural Solutions for Health and Happiness for the Modern Woman podcast with me, Dr. Rachel Winstead. You can reach Dr. Lexi Lain at summitvitality.com or follow her on social media, which I will link in the show notes below. There is a link for the show notes for Dr. Lexi, for also her Summit Vitality YouTube channel, where she shares really great tips. And if you'd like to reach out to her for a speaking event, you can connect with her there as well. If you like what you hear today on this episode and want to share with others, you can find us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. Please remember to click on the link in our show notes and subscribe to our newsletter to get even more great health tips, as well as to learn about any of the other upcoming events. Also, be sure to follow our Facebook and Instagram pages and be the first to know when a new episode drops. Thanks, Dr. Lexi. Thank you, listeners.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Okay.